So what's up people and welcome to the chapter 18 and final chapter discussion of 僕らの血盟 or Our Blood Oath. Yes, it's the final chapter of the series, and no, it doesn't really give a proper closing to the series because from everything that we understand, this series got terminated, not completed. And so typically when these sorts of things happen, the author is given like one episode to wrap up the entire story, and you always know when the termination occurs because of course no author can wrap up an entire series in just one episode. And so this is unfortunate in many ways, and I do want to talk about something as far as the trend that you see in Shueisha these days. And why I say it's unfortunate is twofold. One is because this story was very interesting. It was very unique in many ways, which I will talk about later on. But the other is, in an ironic way, chapter 18 turned out to be the best chapter, in my opinion, out of the entire series. It was really starting to gain good momentum and showing its strengths. And unfortunately, it's the end, and so I'm not talking about it being a great chapter because of its final moments. I'm talking about the fact that the continuation and how the character development was going, even in this final chapter, was very well done. So despite it being the end, the author, Kazu Kakazu, did a very good job of continuing to make the story move along. And if you recall in the last chapter, in chapter 17, there was that discussion that Shin and Ko had with regards to whether Cain should be given another chance to redeem or whether he should pay the final price for his past sins. And of course, Ko took the side of Cain needing to be terminated because he did so many sins in the past, and Shin was the argument of every person should be given a chance to redeem themselves. Now, of course, Ko's side does make sense in the sense that can Cain actually redeem himself? And at the end of chapter 17, we know that they disappeared and went off on their own, and so Cain is left in that limbo situation, and if he's left down there too long, he will transform irreversibly to a vampiric beast. And then there will be no way to save him except to really terminate him. And so how this was going to follow in chapter 18 was very interesting. And we find out in chapter 18 that Rangetsu, Ko's uncle, is still worried about what's going to happen to Cain. And right at that point, Shin and Ko return. And also at that point, Cain actually breaks out of that limbo prison. And we find out just how strong Cain is because of his royal blood. He had enough power to overcome Rangetsu's entrapment, and he was able to get out of that prison. And of course, because he is at the verge of transforming into a vampiric beast, and because he is in so much pain due to his hunger, he lunges at Shin to try to get blood. And of course, Rangetsu, being the strong vampire that he is, immediately pins him down and stops him. And so Cain is in this desperate situation, in excruciating pain and agony, trying to get some blood. And of course, Ko says a very interesting thing in the sense that he did commit many sins to which he needed to redeem himself. But at the same time, what Shin and Ko did to Cain by entrapping him in that limbo was something that was very oppressive to Cain. And so Ko wanted to apologize, but before he did that, he wanted to tell Cain there was something Cain needed to do. And at that point, Kiri comes into the room. Now, of course, this becomes a very uncomfortable situation to Cain because of the fact that he's desperately hungry for blood, but he knows what he did is wrong, and he is not exactly sure how to respond to this. But before he can respond, Kiri actually saves Cain by offering blood. And everybody is surprised at that. That wasn't the reaction that they expected. And of course, even Kane kind of asks, why are you being so merciful? And Kiri answers, regardless of what you did, I personally know just how much agony you're in. And so I do want to help you out to get you out of that pain. And more than anything else, more than the entrapment in the limbo, more than any other discussion, that is what makes Kane apologize for the actions that he has done in the past. And so this is a very well written episode in terms of the character development that's going on. You see that in terms of Ko trying to understand the balance between being forgiving and asking for justice, and looking at how Kiri will respond to determine how he will respond to many of the situations. Kiri, of course, shows the side of forgiveness, and Kane is the side of a sinner who is trying to figure out whether there is a chance for redemption and whether he should even be redeemed. And so this is a very impactful chapter, considering the fact that this is a chapter that's forcing an ending. I thought the depth that the characters were brought in this chapter was probably the most significant out of all of the chapters that we have seen. So Kazu Kakazu, very good job. Very, very good job. And of course, then it gets to the ending. And this is the part where probably the author was informed that he would have to end this series with this chapter. And so we find a couple of things. One is that Kane reflects on what has happened to turn him into that person. And we find out that after the entire massacre of Akatsuki, he was saved by the actual antagonist who killed Ko's father and mother. And because he was saved by that person, probably due to whatever influence that person had, he was raised to be the hateful vampire that created that problems for Kiri and Aki. And he reflected on what would have happened if he was saved by somebody such as Shin and Ko or their parents. Would the situation and would he have been a different person? And of course, this sort of question comes up in many sort of series. Probably the one that I am most familiar with is something like Ganmu or Battle Angel Alita. And many people often say if Alita was resurrected by somebody like Desanova rather than Daisuke Ito, would she have turned out to be a very different person? You know, if somebody is saved by somebody like the Joker in Batman, then would they turn out to be somebody more like Harley Quinn rather than somebody like the Robin, right? Dick Grayson. And so these sorts of questions do come up, and of course this is brought up in this particular series. And that continues to bring depth. If the series continued to go on, it would have been interesting to understand the relationships that are created by the antagonist and many of the characters that come out. And it does give a little bit more information with regards to who this antagonist is. And of course, the final information is Ko, who is wondering whether he should even be royalty because it brings so much darkness and difficulty to the people around him. Maybe he should have been a commoner and that would have made life easier for everybody else. But Shin answers, if you weren't royalty, I would have never been saved. And so I, as an older brother, am very grateful for who you are as you are. And that, of course, ends the series. So I did find this series to be very enjoyable. It's a very unique series in that it has a very special character bond between the brothers of Shin and Ko that you don't see in too many other manga series or anime series. The one series that I would say that has a very similar brotherhood bonding is that of Full Metal Alchemist. And that one was very special as well. But the one that makes this one, again, very different from that particular series is the very positive and affectionate, empathic nature of Shin. He is an older brother who really, really appreciates Ko for who he is. And considering the fact that Ko is this happy-go-lucky sort of character, one does see a very strong charisma in Shin because of his strong appreciation for Ko and his positive attitude towards everything. And that's something, again, that you don't often see in a vampire sort of story. Oftentimes vampire stories are very violent, very dark, and you get things like Hellsing, where it's a very interesting story and you do see lots of twists and turns, but it's all about the darkness and the evil and everything that comes in. You hardly ever see a situation where vampires and their minions are represented as being so pure and good, even compared to the humans that come out in the story. And so one of the messages that you can see is that it isn't the vessel or the body or the creation that you can be in. It is the spirit and the value and the things that that person represents that really determines whether that person is evil or good. You can be born as a monster and still be towards the light side based upon the actions and the values that you hold. And I thought that that was a message that was very interesting for Bokura no Ketsumei. And it's unfortunate that this particular scenario wasn't given a chance to move forward. And I was curious, so I went into the forum side to see what the comments were from the readers. And it was interesting because of the fact that despite the early chapters where many readers were going boring, when you read the comments for this chapter, there was a lot of disappointment in the sense that they were saying this is really unfortunate because we're now finally getting to the really interesting parts and the publisher had to cut it. And so the question I was wondering is, did the publishers really follow the story and understand the story and look at it as a potential to become great? Or did they just bother to look at the statistics of how much following it had and just made their decision based upon that rather than looking at the creative nature of the story? From my perspective, I cannot tell. But considering I see the reactions from the comments of the readers versus the thing that you see as an action from the publisher, it almost makes you wonder, maybe the publishers really didn't analyze the quality of the story too much. And that's what I want to come into with regards to the recent genre of mangas by Shueisha. It's gotten to the point where you have to immediately rise up to the top, else you get cut. And there are comics out there who can excel at instant gratification. From the very first chapter, you're hooked and they hit your excitement level so hard that you really start going for the ride. One of the most recent ones is Spy Family. Another one is Monster 8. Another one I remember is Chainsaw Man. Right? In different ways, Spy Family was hilarious and wholesome. Monster 8 is hilarious and action-packed. And Chainsaw Man is edgy and action-packed. And they all rose from the very first chapter. But there are certain stories that like to take their time to develop a solid background first. And by doing so, it does require the readers to commit and maybe make a little bit of a sacrifice to keep on pushing on despite the story having a slow beginning. But if you see the momentum grow, and if you see the story evolving into something interesting, a lot of times you are rewarded later on with a tremendous story because the author had the chance to make the story grow. A good example of that is One Piece, and I probably will make a separate video with regards to this later on, but I remember probably the best way I've heard for One Piece is something that a reactor named Anime-chan has said in YouTube, where she said, One Piece does take its time to tell its story, and there is some pacing issues, but if you decide to keep on going on, you are so rewarded in the end. And I was hoping that maybe Bokura no Ketsumei will be given a chance beyond chapter 16, chapter 17, 18 to get the ability to grow itself and to make itself very interesting. And the recent chapters I saw was very heartening and very in-depth and gave a vision of where this story was going to go. But unfortunately, it got cut, and so we will really never find out what the potential of the story was. Now, with that said, there has been stories that have been resurrected back and given another chance. And once that happened, it took off. A good example of that is One Piece once again. It started out with the short stories of Romance Dawn, and once those were finished, it reinvented itself again and became One Piece. Maybe if there's enough reactions from the commenters in the Shueisha website or to the publisher, maybe they will rethink their actions and give this story another chance. I am not going to hold my breath because this is usually one chance in 100, right? But if it is given a chance, I do feel that I would like to seriously continue to read the story because it was getting very good. But even if it doesn't get a chance, I do want to thank the author, Kazu Kakazu, for writing a very interesting story. Yes, it started out slow, but even from the beginning, there was that special chemistry between the two brothers. And as the story got complex, and with the various growth in the world and the character, that bonding between the two brothers became even more prevalent. So I really enjoyed reading this series, and despite whatever happens in the future, I thank you very much, Kakazu-sensei, and I wish you the very best in your future manga development. Anyway, that's it for Bokura no Ketsumei. I guess this will be the final episode of my video for this. Thank you very much, and until whatever manga video I make in the future, I wish you all well, and as always, Jaya, nice day.